From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 39. I'm really excited for today's guest, who's been a Cressey sports performance athlete dating all the way back to high school. He's only got 2 years in the big leagues, but as you'll learn today, he's wise beyond his years, so we're in for a real treat with today's interview. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. I'm an avid user of Athletic Greens myself, in spite of the fact that I tend to be a supplement minimalist. To me, this is a product that is much more like whole food nutritional insurance as opposed to a true supplement. The ingredients have been carefully selected at the highest quality, most natural source. You get essential vitamins and minerals, digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and that's the zero compromise approach from the company. It's plant-based, sourced from whole foods at the highest quality, so you won't find harmful chemicals, artificial colors or flavors, preservatives, or added sugar. Really, it's perfect for folks who are gluten and dairy-free, paleo, keto, vegan-friendly, great for people who are intermittent fasting, all that fun stuff. Personally, I love it for obviously our athletes who don't get enough nutritional benefits from fruits and vegetables because they don't eat enough. So it's a way to kind of plug in holes in diets. But also, I really like it for our college and professional athletes who may have complex travel schedules where quality food options aren't always at hand. On a personal level, I'm a husband, father of 3, and an entrepreneur. We split our time between 2 states, and I'm also still an avid lifter. So life is inherently crazy, and it can be stressful, and sleep deprivation is definitely something that we encounter. So I rely on Athletic Greens for part of my immune support, and believe firmly that it's made a big difference in keeping me healthy in spite of how crazy our lifestyle is. They've got a great offer in place. If you head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey, they'll get you 20 free travel packets with your purchase. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, and you can claim your special offer. Today's guest grew up in Rhode Island and was a multi-sport athlete in high school. As a senior in 2013, he was named the Gatorade Baseball Player of the Year for the state of Rhode Island, and then he went on to play 3 years of college baseball at Boston College. He was drafted by the Marlins in the 12th round of the 2016 MLB draft, and after the 2017 season, he was traded to the New York Yankees. He began the 2018 season in High A and earned promotions to Double A and Triple A over the course of a season where he put up a 1.79 ERA over 161 innings, striking out 152 and walking only 29. He was named the Yankees Minor League Pitcher of the Year. He earned a Major League Spring Training invitation this spring and received an MLB call-up this September, making his debut on September 27th versus the Texas Rangers. He pitched 2 scoreless innings in relief. Please welcome to the show, Mike King. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
This is going to be a lot of fun. And I think it's important that I kind of create some context for the listeners because they've already heard your bio. You have 2 career major league innings. So I'm sure there's a large contingent from the audience, excluding your family, who's probably listening to this, who are wondering why you're on here. So here's the story I'm going to tell to justify it. So every year at our Massachusetts facility, we run an event called A Night with the Pros. And what it is, it's an opportunity for parents, kids, all different ages to basically sit in on a roundtable discussion. We have, I think the year that you were on the panel was Alex Trezza, the pitching coach at BC. It was Bob Tewksbury, a sports psychologist. There were other pro guys. Ray Fagnant was a scout that was on the panel. So it was a very good crew of people from a wide variety of aspects of baseball. And at the end of the night, I remember turning to my wife and being like, King had the entire room eating out of the palm of his hand. You were like a seasoned veteran on the panel. And my wife looked at me and she's like, if our daughters were like 22 years older, I would be totally fine with Mike dating them. Like,
wow.
So you're a fan, you're very, very popular in the Cressey family. And, it's not just your hard work, but it's how you carry yourself. And I think you're a big time student of the game. And that's something that'll probably come forward, as we go through this discussion.
Oh, well, thank you. That's one of the biggest compliments I ever gotten from Anna. I gotta thank her for that.
So in other words, don't blow it on this podcast. This is your chance to totally blow it. So let's, with that said, you're a Northeast guy, right? You're, born and raised in Rhode Island, a two-sport athlete all the way up, basketball and baseball. And I know that was something that you feel like is a really, really important part of your development. What tips, what mistakes did you make? What things did you do well that helped your development? And what tips would you give to other multi-sport players, particularly in the Northeast who are trying to get seen?
Yeah, I mean, I was blessed that the high school that I went to, Bishop Hendricken, actually had produced a lot of talent. So I didn't have to kind of go to all these showcases and get my name out there because there were already a bunch of scouts that were looking at guys that were the class ahead of me or even two classes ahead of me. So then on the off chance that I pitched an inning or was hitting that day and hit particularly well, they were able to see that. But I mean, being a two-sport athlete, I miss it now. Even when I'm home, my mom still works at Hendricken. So my mom is a key. And when I'm home, I go to the gym 2-3 times a week just to play some basketball. And I know it's probably not the best thing now because for injury-related stuff, but it just keeps me athletic. And I feel like, especially becoming just a pitcher, made me so unathletic. And it was just throw the ball to the plate. You're not expected to make a great play coming back to you. You see very few guys in the big leagues. Greinke's one of them that actually feels their position really well. But I felt so unathletic once I got away from basketball. And I mean, it adds to everything, whether it's your off-season workouts or on-field play. You just feel so much more comfortable when your body feels athletic. So I hate the guys that I hate the guys is kind of rude, but the guys that totally give up a sport just to specify in one of them, it just makes no sense because high school is the time to do it. Especially, I loved being in season because it kind of got me on schedule. It gave me something to do where I knew, okay, I was practicing from this time to this time, so I knew that I only had this hour to do homework or whatever it was. And I knew my fall was always the worst GPA I had when I was in high school, just because I got to basketball season and I would think that my grades would drop, but it was really, okay, I knew that from 3 to 4 I could do homework. From 4:30 to 6:30 I was practicing. So and then I was going home, eating, and going to bed. So it kind of gave me a good calendar to follow.
I don't think a lot of people realize just how many changes of directions, like plyometric stimuli you get. I mean, I remember reading a study years and years ago that the average midfielder in soccer has 2,200 changes of direction in a given game. They run 7 miles and it's all just sprint, walk, sprint, walk. Basketball is very, very comparable. And it's hard to make that up just doing PFPs and taking ground balls and just trying to find ways to be athletic when you're a pitcher only at a young age.
Totally. And I know you incorporate a lot of stuff that kind of gets your body in different positions than a baseball field, just because you're trying to get that athleticism back. And my biggest thing, and I love bringing up the argument that playing basketball is great conditioning for pitchers, because especially starting pitching, because it's endurance over the long haul, but then it's really quick bursts of lateral movement. So when you're pitching, you want to have the endurance to go 120 pitches, pitch a complete game, but then it's very sudden bursts of that lateral movement. So I thought that basketball was great to have right before the season started because it got my body perfect. And it made me kind of skinny, and I know we'll probably get into that, but if I was able to keep the weight on and create that power, that's when my body felt the best.
And I think you were always good. I remember having conversations, you were very well read with respect to someone like Alan Jager's long toss philosophies back then. You were a guy that was going and doing your throwing program after basketball practice in the gymnasium. So you were prepping for the spring, knowing that basketball was going to go right up to the day that, spring sports started.
100%. And that's another thing where guys, instead of giving up on that being a two-sport athlete, you just kind of have to make it work. And I knew that basketball wasn't my calling. I knew I wasn't going to be going D1 or playing professional basketball as a 6'3" center in Rhode Island. So I knew it wasn't going to happen. So as much as I still gave my heart and soul to basketball and I loved playing all those games, it was I had to save some energy because I knew that I needed to keep my arm ready for the spring. Jager was big on kind of creating intent for me. And I knew it was a I don't know, novice. It was in its early stages
Yeah.
in terms of if long toss is good for you, if long toss is bad,
Mm-hmm.
what guys do it, what guys shouldn't do it, all that kind of stuff. And I felt like me being able to, and it was just a competition because instead of lighting up a radar gun, I would just go back and say, oh, I got to 320 feet today. Like I got to beat that the next time I long toss, whatever it is. And so then it created that explosive movement that as a high schooler you're not really getting unless you already are lighting up the radar gun. But I think that was one big jump in velocity from like my sophomore to my junior year,
Mm-hmm.
just because I took care of my arm while playing basketball.
And one of the things I always remember is a conversation I had with Mike Gambino right after he got the job at BC, and something that really stood out in my mind was he made a comment. He's like, we don't want guys that couldn't go to Virginia. Like, we don't want guys that couldn't go to Miami. Like, we want guys that wanted to go to BC. And
Yeah.
you were a guy that, like, BC was it. That was your choice. And looking back, like, you and Justin Dunn and Jake Stevens and, Jeff Burke and all those guys, like, were integral parts of really, like, establishing a program that obviously went far in postseason play. Like, what was it about BC that jumped out as, like, the perfect fit for you?
Honestly, I wanted to be in the ACC. The ACC was big for me. Obviously, it's a great conference, arguably the best baseball conference, and being close to home was also a big part. So it had those extras, but then the culture that was being created there seemed to be what I'm about and what I felt like what I would fit into. And that's 100% created by Gambino. Scott Friedholm was the pitching coach there, so he was kind of the one that mainly recruited me, and it ended up being Jim Foster. I had a great relationship with him too, but and it's kind of a weird process of getting recruited. Gambino does it a totally different way. And there are a lot of times that I'm like, this guy, he does not know how to recruit, because there are so many, and I give him crap for it all the time, where Dunny and I both got recruited and he told both of us that we weren't good enough to play in Division I baseball, especially ACC baseball. And so when you're a sophomore in high school hearing that, you're like, you have two mentalities. You either want to prove the guy wrong, or you just totally crumble and say, okay, I got to start looking elsewhere. And I think Gambino was kind of testing you, because if you actually took it on as a challenge and said, I'm going to prove this guy wrong, that's the guy that you want in your foxhole, in the dugout fighting for you, whatever it is. And so it ended up creating a really good chemistry in the locker room, because, and then obviously we bust on Gambino a lot about like that. It's just not a good recruiting technique. And there are so many guys that did that actually he was totally right on, where there are a bunch of my buddies. I remember one of my friends was getting recruited by BC and UConn. And I always felt like BC had a much higher standard than UConn. It's in the ACC. It's probably better academics. I'm not trying to
watch yourself. I'm a UConn grad. Be careful.
Well, I'm sorry, but so I'm thinking, okay, BC should be able to get these recruits. But then I hear about the recruiting process, and Gambino's tough on the kids, seeing their personality, their character, and UConn says, we plan on you getting drafted after your junior year. And we are trying to get somebody else because we know you're going to be gone after 3 years. And as a sophomore, junior in high school, that's exactly what you want to hear. You want to hear, I'm going to this program to get drafted. So there were definitely guys that chose a UConn, or I know Bryant got really good while I was there, that are guys from the Northeast that are 100% good enough to play in the ACC, but chose a different school because of different recruiting techniques. And I was thinking that he missed on a lot of guys, and now looking back at it, he created I know it's that miracle quote where like, I don't want the best players, I want the right players. And he totally did that, where he probably took some chances on not as great a talent, but knew that they were going to be great locker room guys. They're great guys to have playing behind you. And it ended up creating like an unbelievable chemistry. And that's what got us almost to Omaha.
Yeah, I was going to say, and speaking of that, you went to Boston College, obviously took a big step forward. I think probably we'd both agree the biggest step was sophomore to junior year. And I know you guys, collectively, I remember Jeff Burke in particular talked about it a lot, but also, Dunn, Stevens, like you guys talked a lot about Coach Jim Foster and like what a difference he made for you on the pitching side of things. He's an Army now and doing a great job there. I actually saw him a couple weeks ago. But what was it about Coach Foster that was so impactful for you? Like it was a resounding theme that I heard from several people. So I'm curious what the big takeaway was.
Yeah. First off, he's a winner.
Yeah.
Everywhere he coached, he won. He won the A10 at URI like 10 years in a row before he got there. I don't know exactly the stat, but he's a winner. And he came into BC, and originally we had more of a kind of take academics first or even partying first. Not us, but like the BC character, the baseball character, and Gambino was trying to change it. And it took a few recruiting classes to then change that to, instead of partying for like being at school to party or to get a degree. I know that probably sounds bad. Like I'm saying take athletics over academics, but we then started thinking about baseball first, where like giving up a weekend of partying or a night of partying or whatever it was to really hone in on baseball. And Foster brought that out in us. And it wasn't like a militant, like really strict, you guys are going to get punished for going out. It was just the way that he talked about baseball so passionately. It totally spread through the locker room. And yeah, I mean, I know you've talked to him, but he is one of the smartest baseball guys I've ever talked to. And
he's still playing. Like he was just down here in Florida in like a men's league. He's still going at it.
And I mean, he's probably winning there too. It's ridiculous.
He also tried to fight the entire University of Miami team in that game on the road during the postseason too.
Yes,
so
in the Super Regional.
Yeah,
and that's just the kind of guy he is, because he has the team's back. And he just wants to win so bad that he will fight everybody. And he's a big, scary dude. He's got to be like 6'4", 6'5", pushing 3 bills, just just a thick dude. So that's another thing. You want to have your coaches on your side. You want to feel like you're all part of a team. Mm-hmm. And I know that that's like an unwritten rule. If somebody gets thrown out in a game, the manager then has his back and then gets thrown out behind him. Mm-hmm. And Foster was going to do that. Gambino was going to do that too. Dunny always brings up the story. When we were in the regional against Ole Miss, or it was at Ole Miss was hosting the regional, and we played Tulane first game, and Dunny pitched against them, and we blew them out, ran through them. I think it was like 7-0 or 7-1, something like that. Second game, I'm pitching, and Utah was the 4 seed against Ole Miss, and they actually beat them in extra innings. So we ended up playing Utah in the second game, and I was pitching against them, and I struggled early. I don't know, it was like a 2-0 or 3-0 after 3 innings. And in the third inning, we realized that the first base coach was tipping pitches, and he was yelling "you" every time I was throwing an off-speed pitch. And it was because like I got my weird mechanics, so I was turned so much to home plate that my glove ended up being out in plain sight for the first base coach. Mm-hmm. So he could see my grip in my glove. And because it was loud in the stadium, whatever, we didn't really pick up on it. But then we started to figure it out that he was getting us. So it just so happened that inning, the last out was a ground ball to the first baseman. So now I got to go over and cover first. And I say some choice words to the first base coach and come back into the dugout, and Gambino, Foster, they're all like, well, what was that all about? Because our catcher backed up first base and Nick Shortino, and he's jabbing at the first base coach and everything. So as we get back into the dugout, our coach is like, well, what was this all about? We tell him kind of thing. And Foster was great because I started getting a little emotional. Like I'm more concerned about them tipping pitches or picking up my pitches than actually competing. And so he was talking about how as a hitter, you honestly cannot make that change, because it was right like at my leg lift when he was yelling "you," and he said, I guarantee you can still throw your off-speed pitches and still get guys out. And in the next inning, I ended up like punching out the side all on off-speed pitches, and the guy was still yelling "you" and everything, but it was just one of those where I felt good about myself. And then as I'm walking back into the dugout, we were on the third base side of the dugout. The third base coach and I were about to cross paths, and he stopped to let me walk by him. And I said some choice words. I definitely can't say it on the podcast, but I said it like under my breath just so he could hear it. And I guess he turned around and like said something to me that I didn't hear, because all of a sudden I see Gambino, Sullivan, and Foster sprint out at that coach, like about to fight that coach, because they thought that he initiated it at me. And it was, but that was the chemistry that we had as a team, and that's why we got so far. Mm-hmm. Foster was huge in that chemistry, but then the biggest thing, and I know that he has this effect on all the pitchers and Nick Shortino, our catcher, was just how he read swings. That was the biggest step. And like going from sophomore to junior year, it was different because he still called the pitches, but I was aware of every pitch that he called. And there were a few pitches that I was like, what the hell? Why is he calling this pitch? And I'd come into the dugout, ask him about it, have intelligent conversations about it. And then he would either convince me, okay, yeah, that was the right pitch, or I would convince him, yeah, that was right, based on what we were seeing. But it ended up making me have a relationship with the pitching coach and the catcher, which then I was able to take all throughout my professional career, because having a good relationship with your catcher, I feel like, is the best thing. And in almost every level I've been at, the catcher's been my best friend. It just works that way. And Foster was the one that really kind of instilled that in the whole pitching staff. And then as I started to have those more and more of those conversations, I was able to take it into pro ball, and I felt like it gave me a leg up because not many people had that teaching.
Yeah.
And
that's not easy, because you've jumped levels through pro ball and had a lot of catchers in a short amount of time. And, there's been language barriers and all those too. So
yeah, one of my favorites actually a Venezuelan catcher, and totally, there's definitely a language barrier, but you just got to work it out. And once your catcher, especially for me, I've experienced it. Once your catcher kind of realizes how much of a student of the game you are, then they almost try to outdo you. And now you can actually have awesome conversations of like, I tell the guy, I love having conversations in between innings with my catcher. I have my catcher sit down next to me and I game plan the next 3 hitters. And I'm always optimistic, like I'm only going to face 3 hitters in this inning. We're only going to go over those 3 hitters. And it's a pitch for pitch sequence. First pitch, what I want to set them up with, what I'm going to finish them with, everything. If I get behind, this is where we're going. And so he knows exactly what I want to do. And there's a bunch of times throughout a game, throughout a season, that a catcher will actually put down something different than what we just talked about. And I tell my catchers, if you see something that they're doing, and hitters are so transparent, whether how they get into the box, how they're gripping the bat, and they're actually verbal behind the plate. So catchers will pick up on stuff that they say and call their own game. So I tell them, if you get something that I can't see from the mound, tap your chest and then put down the other pitch. And now I have full faith that whatever you saw is the right pitch. And that works where I'm going to come in the dugout and say, okay, what did you see? Because now it's stuff that I put in my notes or save for the future on if I see another guy do this. And some of the catchers are like, oh, well, I just thought it was the right pitch and I know you wanted it this way. And that's when I kind of get on the guy and I'm like, no, that's not how we work. We are going to operate based on past events. And I know that this sequence works, or I know this pitch works against this swing. We're not just going to say you think that it's the right pitch. And so once you develop those relationships, it makes the game so much more fun, because you're not just out there saying, this is my best, I want to see your best. It's like, I know your worst, and then I'm going to attack it with my best too. And we're going to see who comes out victorious. And hopefully that's me.
I like it. And so dating back, so you get drafted by the Marlins. In fact, you got drafted while you were pitching in that Miami series. I remember I was feeding twins at home while my wife was working, watching the ticker. I'm like, you won't know for a couple hours. But after you got drafted by the Marlins, you had a big velocity jump in your first half season with that organization. And thinking back, like our postseason meetup was one of my more entertaining postseason evaluations of my career. So you gotta tell the story. Like, what was the difference? What all of a sudden you started seeing these 97s you had never seen before. So what's the scoop?
Yeah. So in college, I was 88 to 91. I remember having a pro day and being like, I'm going to light up the gun because I want scouts to see me. And I think I touched a 92. But whatever, all throughout college, I hit 92 and I was about 210. I think the most I ever weighed was 214. And it was tough. We had 6 a.m. conditioning. A lot of the lifts that we did were more like dynamic lifts. It wasn't just like putting up as much weight as you can. You had 60 seconds to do this and then a 10-second break and 60, whatever. And it was tough for me to keep weight on. And once I got to pro ball, I started off the year in rookie ball, and I was there for 2 weeks longer than I thought I was going to be. So I was a little upset. So I started eating and drinking my sorrows away. Definitely had a few too many beers. And then I get placed in Batavia. Batavia is our short season. I love the guys on the team. We had a fun team. We were terrible. We almost set the record for the most losses in the New York Penn League. But I was out of the bullpen because they were limiting my innings. And so I was going 1 inning stints, and I was throwing as hard as I could. And I just remember telling guys on the team, I'm just going to go out there and throw as hard as I can. And my first outing up there, we had like the starter the next day would be in the stands doing the gun and doing the book. And he came in the locker room after the game and said, "What do you normally sit velo wise?" And I said, like 88, 91. And he was like, "Well, you were 95, 97, like sitting 96 the whole inning." And I was like, there's no way. There's no way I gained like 5 miles an hour just because like from whatever, being a 1 inning guy now. And he said, I swear that's how it was. And I never really knew exactly what it was until we had our eval, and I realized that I was 230 pounds, and I remember
I was going to say 227, but if you want to give yourself 230, I'm on board.
I know I got up to, I might have tried to slim down before I had my eval, but I know I got to 230, and when I left, we did a body comp, and I was like 21 or 22% body fat. And I remember being like, this is like borderline obese.
Yeah,
but
you were like 2 months away from being like auditioning for Santa Claus at the local mall.
So now I'm like, okay, it's strictly weight. I got to keep my weight up, and it's got to be clean, obviously, if I want to sustain over a season. So I remember that whole off season was kind of keeping it like in the 225 range, but then I get an email from the Marlins saying we want you to come back at 217. I don't know why it was so specific, but it was 217. So I cut weight and came in at 217, and I was good body fat percentage. I don't know, it was like 12 or 13% body fat. And the first like month and a half of the season this is now 2017, I was 88 to 91. And I was like, this isn't it. I got to get my weight up. And I talked to our pitching coach who just got hired that year when I was in low A in Greensboro. And I told him last year, I know I was out of the bullpen, but I was like sitting 4 to 6, touching 7s. There's no way that I should be dropping 5, 6, 7 miles an hour just because I'm a starter. I should be able to at least like touch those numbers. And he was like, okay, well, what was different? And I told him I was a good 12, 13 pounds heavier. And he's like, go get yourself 2 burritos and pack on the weight. And I remember driving home, and the Krispy Kreme donut sign, like the hot now sign was on, and Krispy Kreme's like have a soft spot in my heart. But I was with some of my buddies, and I was like, dude, I'm trying to put on weight. Get me a dozen donuts. And I ended up putting on like 6 pounds in those 5 days in between starts. And the next start, I hit a 96. And I was like, literally, it's strictly weight. So anyway,
carb loaded.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I ended up that season in bad shape in terms of body fat. But I got back to my normal self where my average velo was like, as a starter, trying to, spread it out. It ended up being like 92.5, 93. But it was so much better than 88, 91. And I could play, it just plays at that level so much better. But it ended up being a Sunday tradition. It was me and one of my other buddies, Parker Bug. He went to LSU, who was a beanpole that once he saw that my velo jumped, we would go every Sunday and get a dozen Krispy Kreme and pound it like right there. It wasn't like we made 12 donuts last over a few days. It was right there. We put the 12 donuts down and then got an extra 6 to go home.
And for the record, for everyone listening, you are much, much, much more responsible with your nutrition nowadays.
I am a lot. I don't know. It probably came with a little maturity, but totally. I'm now a solid like 225, 230 that I feel comfortable with my body, and it's not just straight blubber.
But velo jumped a lot, and then obviously the next year there was a life-changing trade to the Yankees. And in part it was because that trade allowed you to make some mechanical changes that you had been wanting to do for a while, but the Marlins hadn't been necessarily receptive to. Talk a little bit about what you were dealing with and how it impacted what you were able to do.
Yeah, so the Marlins were, I'd say, a little cookie cutter. They wanted every pitcher to kind of be the same guy. And as you know, I'm definitely a different body type. I know I'm pretty flexible. And then my mechanics are all over the place. I'm way across my body. I'm late at separation. I'm late at foot strike, but I somehow make it work. Mm-hmm. And the Marlins wanted me to get back to like the normal way of pitching, and they helped me with a lot of things. I know that I started getting my front side way too dominant, and I would pull it hard, so my shoulders ended up being way diagonal, I guess, at release, and they brought me so my shoulders were back. But they forced me to get on the third base side of the rubber and wanted me to throw more four seams. And I'm a straight sinker guy. I've been that way since I was in Little League. I've always just felt like I could get ground balls whenever I wanted. And they didn't want me to be a strictly four seam guy, but they wanted me to throw sinkers arm side and then four seamers glove side. And it just wasn't working for me. It was so tough for me to get command glove side because I'm already a good 8 to 10 inches across my body. And now they brought me where my heel was on the third base side of the rubber. It wasn't just my toe. I was like so far over. And in college, I barely was touching the first base side of the rubber. So it was a good like 2 feet that they brought me over to and their theories made sense. They thought that it was going to create more deception on my fastball, especially to righties, because I'd be throwing from even further behind them, and that it would tighten up my slider. And it was basically strictly fastball changeup for me at that time. But for me, it ended up hurting my command, and I felt like my command is my number one. I'm not going to blow you away with anything. I know I got decent movement on my fastball, but I have to be able to spot it to succeed. If I'm not spotting it, that's when I really got to grind through a few innings to get a decent start in there. So I felt like, yes, it would make my third pitch better, but it was also really, really hurting my first pitch, like my bread and butter. So going to the Yankees helped because they almost they were just hands off. They said, we want you to do what you do. We like you. That's why we traded for you. And then if we have something, if you start to have issues or if we have something that we want you to do, we'll totally like get our hands on you. But for right now, you do you. And, so the three things that I felt like made me have a pretty good year in 2018 was the moving back over. So I ended up getting really good command glove side with my two seamer. So I was able to get easy strikes. Cause no one's going to swing at if you're a right-hand hitter, no one's going to swing at an 0-0 fastball that starts 6 inches off the plate away and come back and catch a corner. And then I was able to get lefties out where instead of only being able to work to one side of the plate, I was able to throw that front hip two-seamer and then totally open up arm side, which is I know I can command it really well there. And so they worked with each other. My slider, it's not that it became a great pitch, but I was able to command it. And that really helped me. And then also I don't know if it's the difference between the Yankees and the Marlins or if it was just kind of moving up in levels. I started to get a lot more data on hitters, whether it was video that I could watch, or just more scouting reports, because once you get to AA, AAA, there are guys that have been there for 10 years, whether they've had big league time or not. So now you're able to kind of get a bunch more data, where when I was in low A with the Marlins, those rosters changed so much that there might be guys like my roommate now, Dunn, never even played in low A. So you got guys that are either skipping right through that level, or are getting released from that level because it looks like they're not going to make it. So those rosters change so much that it's really tough to build a database on those lower level minor leaguers. So those three things were really what helped me out in 2018. It wasn't as much mechanical changes, I'd say. It was more just me kind of getting back to what I felt comfortable doing. Yeah. And because I felt like the Marlins were changing a lot in me, and I wasn't able to just go out there and compete. And I know I actually caught a lot of heat for it in the recruiting or scouting phases when I was in college, where I always thought it was a good thing, but in all my tests, I was result oriented. I wanted to win. I wanted a better pitch. I wanted to get an out, and I didn't care how I did it. I just wanted to win. And they're saying that all the scouts were telling me that in the minor leagues, it's all process oriented because they don't care about wins. They don't care about results because they only care about results in the big leagues. And it made sense. So I had to kind of change my way of thinking. And when I was with the Marlins, it was, we don't care about winning at all. We need you to develop these mechanics, and this pitch and, this location, whatever it is. And it like spooked me. And I wouldn't say I had a bad time with the Marlins in terms of numbers, but it was a constant battle between trying to go out there and competing and winning, and then really trying to develop as well.
Well, I think the other thing that's an interesting discussion now is that, so you found a position on the mound where you're comfortable and you're set in your mechanics, and now you have a four seam that you brought back because you're in positions that feel stable to you, and you're able to start utilizing that more, when in reality it was kind of forced from the positions that you were in.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I just felt like it was too much that the Marlins were trying to make me change. And it's not a bad thing, because I ended up kind of getting all the things that they wanted. They wanted me to have more deception to righties. They wanted me to have a better slider, and they wanted me to throw that four seam. And I ended up getting it because I was comfortable in my mechanics. And I mean, I'm sure that it works differently for different players.
Yeah.
Whether guys need to get uncomfortable to then be able to learn something new, or whatever it is. But for me, I definitely had to be comfortable in my surroundings and in my mechanics to be able to develop something new.
Well, it worked. I mean, 161 innings, 1.79 ERA, and minor league organizational pitcher of the year. So I actually want to ask one other side to this. So,
Okay.
I want to say it was late January, early February, of 2018. So it's a Wednesday. Guys are just finishing up their sprint work at the field, and we're out on the field, and you and Justin Dunn are sitting in the dugout, and Scherzer comes over after finishing up his stuff, and he sits down. He's kind of like at the end of his session, just like gathering his thoughts before he heads out. And I look over, and you guys are like whispering to each other. And it was like clearly obvious, like you wanted to talk to him. You're like, can we ask him questions, whatever? And I was just like, I kind of gave you a nod. I was like, ask him a question, whatever. And I walked off, and I think I went down to right field to like see some of our hitters or whatever it was. And I remember you guys saying, like, I came back a half an hour later, and they were like, you guys were both like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And I remember Peter Gammons actually wrote an article about the two of you after you guys were both minor league pitchers of the year for your respective organizations. You both alluded to that conversation, particularly with respect to what it did for your slider. So what was like the aha moment for you guys in that discussion with him?
Yeah. To start, we both, because we don't want to be like those little rookies, little minor leaguers that are like annoying the big leaguers. And when I'm like looking back at it, if it was like a high school kid or college kid wanted to ask me a question, I'm totally for it. I would not get annoyed by it at all. But so I ended up like kind of cracking some type of joke and like hoping that he would kind of catch the bait. And I'm not a particularly funny guy, so I was like, this is a really stupid way of opening this conversation up. But it ended up working. I forget what it was. And so then we just started going off on everything. And it was more conversational based. It wasn't just like us interviewing him and asking questions. And Dunny's great with that too, because obviously he's the best pitcher in the MLB. And we want to know little secrets. And one of the first questions I asked was about the slider, because that was a big thing that was terrible for me in 2017. And he is elite with it. And not only does he have a slider, now he kind of manipulated it into a cutter and curveball. So I asked him about it, and all throughout 2018, his biggest thing was playing catch with it. And I know it's literally, it sounds so stupid, but when you play catch back to 120 feet, whatever you're doing that day, it's all four seam fastballs or whatever it is. And then you might throw a flat ground, and you might throw 5 or 6 sliders. And then in your bullpen, you might throw 5 or 6 sliders. So the whole day's work, you're only throwing 10 to 12 sliders. And when I'm playing catch with a four, like my two seam got so good, I felt like, because I've thrown it since I was in Little League, and I learned how to manipulate the pitch into more of a true sinker where I could run it, or a true two seam where I could run it, or a true sinker where it just has straight depth. So the little thing of throwing it more made it so I was able to almost just feel it even more, like feel it even better, and have the confidence in throwing it. And so he didn't want to manipulate grips. I told him how all throughout college I had like 6 different grips. And he said the grip really isn't the base of the pitch. It's not like if you just change grip, it's not really going to totally make it an elite pitch. It's what's comfortable in your hand, and then the confidence that you can have thrown behind it. And obviously with him, he like throws the hell out of every pitch. So he has so much intent behind that slider, and so much confidence that where he's throwing it, and what he's doing to manipulate it is going to be perfect. And I didn't have that at all. And every time I was throwing it, it was like a do not hang this, or do not bounce this, instead of just like, oh, I got this kid 0-2 and he's set up for a slider. I'm going to throw a banger and he's going to be done. And it's not like I'm playing catch from 120 feet with the slider, but in my first few throws or last few throws of my catch play, I'd stand at 60 feet and just flip the slider. And so instead of throwing 10 in a day, I was throwing 50, and they were little effort, but getting comfortable with that grip and getting comfortable with like throwing it to a specific area.
Yeah,
Whether it's
not trying to make it too big either. Just trying to make it.
Yeah, and knowing that, like, when I'm just like kind of flipping it, it's not like that's the movement that I want, but the spin of it is what I can see, and now I know exactly how it's coming off my hand, and that's why I love all the new technology of like the TrackMan Rapsodo and like the Edgertronic cameras and stuff, because now not only am I able to feel it, but I can see it, and now I can like visually replicate that and be able to really throw it, and like watching him spin a few with whoever he's throwing with was huge for me, because now I saw the intent that he had behind it, and it's not like there's going to be any stress on his elbow because he's just flipping it, but he's feeling it come off his fingers and he knows how he wants it to spin. And that was huge for the confidence that I had behind the pitch. And it just like, it made me feel so much more comfortable throwing it in any spot, whether it's, I know it's one of their elite hitters and I got a backdoor, a 3-1 pitch to their 3-hole lefty. And it's like, okay, you better not hang this because this kid's going to murder it. Or if you bounce it, you're walking them. So I ended up starting getting so much more confident, with locating it, even though it wasn't the greatest movement, being able to throw a glove side fastball and then being able to locate a slider that honestly, like on the TrackMan, showed that it was a bad pitch, still was able to get a bunch of outs. That's like a big thing. Now I'm changing the movement of it. And it's because when you look at TrackMan, they have the pitch FX ERA, which is the like probability of your ERA with the movement of it and the location of it. And in 2018, it was like a 5 ERA. They projected my slider to produce a 5 ERA, but the actual was like a 1.6. And a lot of that was definitely sequencing. But
it's how it's set up.
And I think a huge aspect of it is the conviction behind it. It wasn't like I was afraid to throw it in any count or to any hitter. It was, I'm coming at you with the nastiest slider you've ever seen. And it was awful, but it still worked because I knew I could get it by guys.
You're one of like the young guys in this game who's a big time student of the game. Like Soroka's similar to that. Like you'll see very few guys that not only embrace the analytics, like Luke Jackson digs into it really, really deeply. I know not a lot of people have the intelligence, but B, the motivation to like nerd out and dig into TrackMan data and all that stuff. Talk about, what tools you utilize to prepare yourself. There are minor league guys on this call who don't even realize this information is out there. It's very specific to the organization. Some organizations, they can't even get it. Whereas I've heard of organizations that do classes on how to understand true media and stuff. Talk about what you look into and how it plays into your pregame prep and also like kind of your postgame reflections. I know you're a big like journal guy, after outings.
My first thing is knowing my identity. And, so I would always tell people that I was a sinker slider guy without a slider. And that was who I thought I was. But now being able to look at the exact movement, knowing I have 11 inches of horizontal break and like 6 inches of depth on my two seam, knowing that I have 0 horizontal break on my slider, but like a good 8-9 inches of depth on that pitch, and a changeup that I had 14-15 inches of horizontal movement and 10 inches of depth, made me realize that I was a two-seam changeup guy that needed to get quick outs to go deep into games. So my identity changed based on knowing those numbers, like the kind of nerd numbers. But I thought it was a great quote. Kevin Reese, he's the director of player development for the minor leagues in the Yankees organization, talked to me this spring. And he said they went through a bunch of different coaching changes, even all throughout this year. And he said that he sat down with each of them, whether it was just like a normal conversation or an interview, every single coach in the organization, and talked to them about the Rapsodo or TrackMan or spin rates or like break Z, all random stuff that is now becoming a thing in baseball. And the Yankees have had the technology and has been using it for a good 2-3 years now. And all the coaches that said like, oh, I'm willing to learn. I don't really know enough about it, but I totally want to start learning that kind of stuff. He said, I knew those weren't the guys for me because it's been out there for 2 years. And now if you're just willing to learn and you don't actually know what's going on, then it totally, that's not the mentality that they want to have. And
you've got to be willing to go down the rabbit hole, and it's a big one. There's a lot of directions you can go.
Exactly. So I then took that to myself. Like, I knew stuff about it, but there was definitely so much that I didn't know about it. And so I didn't know if he was complimenting me because I think of myself as an analytical guy, but or if he was saying like, you guys, all the players need to step up too because it's going to happen with you guys. So I used it as kind of a little kick in the ass, but also like Yankees have this stuff at their fingertips. So my biggest thing, I love just watching video. I don't like using other scouting reports on hitters. So my pregame prep really ends up being watching video, whether it's the last 25 at bats that they've had against right-handed pitchers. I'll look at spray charts, and then I like seeing the hot cold zones. But there's so many things that go into that where like a guy's cold in this area, but you never know if he just saw 10 nasty sliders after well-executed fastballs. So it's like he might not really be cold in that area because he just whatever it is. So that's why I like looking at video myself. And that's probably a little old school instead of using all the numbers. But for me, I use those numbers, the analytical side of it, to really help myself out, to make myself better. And like this goes into the identity thing. So I throw a laminar two seam. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
So I think Trevor Bauer was the one that kind of crowned that term. And I never knew what it was until this year. And my pitching coach, this guy Tommy Phelps up in Scranton, AAA, said like he assumed that I had a laminar, and then we see it on Edutronic video and all this kind of stuff. And basically it actually affects my numbers. So my two-seamer seemed to be decently average on compared to other two-seamers, but I felt like it played up always. And I always thought it was just like because I could convict the pitch, but I was actually throwing the laminar effect. So basically it's like you have the smooth surface of the ball throwing a two-seamer on both sides of it. Mine, instead of being angled just arm side and almost look like I'm pronating it, it's actually a cutter. And it's cut spin that, because the smooth side of the ball is like has that laminar, I think it's laminar express, actually pushes the ball down and to the right for me as a right-handed pitcher. But looks like a cutter. And I think for me being
you'll see it with Kluber as well. There was some really good slow-mo stuff of him in the 2016 World Series where you look at how late his hand is in supination, his delivery, and then it runs like a two-seam, and it just doesn't make sense. So.
Yeah. And one of my best friends in the Yankees, this kid Brian Keller, he would watch, like I would play catch with him, or he would stand behind me when I was throwing a bullpen, and he is just like, this makes no sense. You're literally throwing a cutter out of your hand. It's coming off, cut, spin, everything, but it's running like a two-seamer. And I still don't, I'm still trying to learn like what laminar effect actually means. I know it has to do with like the magnitude or like the Magnus effect and all different stuff of it. But to me, knowing that then made me feel even more confident in my pitches. So going to the TrackMan and seeing spin rates and break X, break Z, even like release points that I always just said like, oh yeah, it looks like my fastball, slider, and changeup are all coming out of the same slot. And then I go look at it, and my slider is 2 inches higher and 2 inches further, like towards the first base side. So I'm like, okay, now that's an immediate tell that my slider isn't going to play as well as my changeup is because my two-seam and changeup are in the same slot. I think the numbers I use more for developing myself, but then the notes that I take are all on hitters, are all on swings, and so the notes that I have, I hate reflecting on outings. I always say like it's in the past, but all throughout the game, I'm writing notes on what I'm seeing on hitters.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just like straight to a name. So I'm not really, there are a lot of swings that are pretty similar that I could say, okay, this swing, I know in the past I've attacked it this way and it's worked, because his hands drop or whatever it is. But my notes in game are the biggest thing that is able to like kind of center me almost. Like I feel like everybody has to have something that kind of brings them down to earth, whether it's something's getting out of hand, you start to struggle, or umpire isn't calling it the right way, and your mind starts to get away from just competing. Reading my book, knowing my notes, knowing how to attack hitters brings me right back down to earth. And it was actually Coach Gambino that said it, where when I started doing this my sophomore year, but it was more like a kind of trial and error my sophomore year because I didn't really know what I was looking at. But he said, he compared it to a test, and he said, if you're in elementary school or whatever, and you study for like hours for a test that you're about to take the next day, and you go into the test knowing everything like the back of your hand, you go in there confident, like I'm going to ace this test. But if you barely study or don't study at all, you go into that like, I really hope I don't fail because I'm not going to expect an A, but like whatever. And I took that approach to baseball. Like, I want to be on the mound with all the confidence in the world that I know every hole that this hitter has. And so it's not just, I hope that my stuff is better than his stuff that day. It's, my stuff is going to be placed in the correct spot because I know exactly how to get this hitter out. And that came from the watching video. And a lot of it's tedious. And a lot of people, I either get guys that say, I don't know how you actually do this, because I'll do it. It's fun for me. I end up like sitting at home, and because we ended up getting iPads in AA and AAA with the Yankees, and I would sit at home and watch 2 hours of video. And it's just, whether it's on the team I'm facing next or big league hitters or whatever it is, I'm just trying to learn it. I love watching video on hitters. And so guys would say, oh, it's just tedious. I couldn't sit down for that long and do it. Or guys say, I have no idea what I'm even looking for. And none of them, not many at least, have come up to me and asked me to run through like a video session and teach them, okay, this is what I see in this hitter. This is why I'm putting down whatever it is. Can't hit an inside fastball, or up and in really exposes down, different things. And none of them want to learn. And I'm totally willing to teach them, but I'm also totally fine with them not learning, because now I feel like I have a leg up on the competition. And you're totally right. You got the guys like Soroka, or even hearing Garrett Cole talk after one of his starts in the World Series. It's like he talks about all the notes, all the video that he watched, all the analytics that are at his fingertips and him using, and now he's the best pitcher in the MLB. So I think that I definitely was blessed with a little bit of talent, but I'm not blessed with 100 miles an hour and a banger of a slider. I can't spin the ball incredibly well. So I know I have to find some type of leg up on the competition to stay ahead of the curve. And right now, analytics, video, statistics, all that kind of stuff are giving it to me.
Absolutely. And, you hinted at it earlier, but we talked a lot about how your hypermobility allows you to get into some different positions on the mound. What are some of the big lessons you learned over the years in this regard, whether it's training, throwing, or really anything else?
Yeah. It all comes from you, actually. So, not trying to toot your horn here, but
I'll take it since you said I'm just a UConn delinquent.
Yeah, PC over UConn here, but I always felt like I was hypermobile. I always felt like I had kind of a whippy arm and loose limbs and stuff, but I never really knew what it meant. So this kind of, I guess, goes back to knowing your identity. So in terms of training, I always felt like you got to stretch, you got to make sure your muscles are all prepared to then go put up some weight. And I learned, like, because I'm so mobile, I feel like I have to strengthen it to then kind of counterbalance that. And I feel being hypermobile is like a blessing and a curse, because I feel like it puts your body in so many bad positions, but you're hoping that because you're hypermobile, your body can take care of it. And so in the training world, I know like in all of the, I just kind of learned this from you, where in all of my warm-ups and everything, most of it is like an activation type stuff. I don't know if there's ever anything that I'm actually stretching. I'm not like sitting there stretching out my shoulder or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're doing an active warm-up to then kind of get those muscles firing, but there's no need for me to really stretch these muscles out because I know that I have pretty good hips and good like layback in ER and all that kind of stuff. So that, for moving it to the baseball world, on the mound, I felt like I was able to get myself into different positions that became deceptive towards a hitter. And at a younger age, I felt like the whippiness of my arm kind of gave me some velocity.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I combined it with strength, I realized that I could be in bad positions, which are different to hitters,
Mm-hmm.
and not like that Iron Mike, like totally right over the top.
No.
My hand up at foot strike and visible to the hitter. I can have that thing almost like near my hip at foot strike and still be able to get the ball in the strike zone. So it's and I've also battled a few injuries, so I have no idea if it comes from being too hypermobile or not, but I know it's a blessing and a curse because my deception is one of my keys to being successful, and I don't think that and I don't know if you could say the same thing, but I don't know if I would be as successful if I wasn't as hypermobile. I feel like my mechanics would be all over the place. I wouldn't have any command, and I wouldn't be able to repeat my delivery because it looks so like non-repeatable.
Yeah. Well, you look at like historically speaking, right? You took kind of like two really big jumps velocity wise, right? There was the one from being kind of that 84, 85 high school kid who became an 88, 91 guy, which was basically two things. One, you started lifting, and two, you kind of reduced the aerobic stimulus from your basketball career, right? So
Yep.
those two things provided you some stability. And then you talked also about like kind of the initial foray into professional baseball is you added body weight. And anytime you add body weight, you add cross-sectional area, and you inherently are going to create some muscle mass that helps to stabilize joints. So if you look back on it, like those two big surges have both been at times when you got stronger, by different mechanisms, but you got stronger.
Yeah, totally.
So, all right. So now that we're pretty far in, we got to go to the lightning round. This is a fun part.
Okay.
And I'm at, all right. So best advice for a teenage Mike King.
Honestly, it'd be to eat. And I totally would 100% rather be like I guess not fat kid, but if I knew that weight would translate into velocity, I would have 100% done it so much earlier because as much as I feel like I have totally gained some success in the baseball world, I really wanted to get drafted out of high school, and I really wanted to be a high pick out of college. And I didn't get drafted out of high school because I was like topping at 88, 89, and I slipped to the 12th round, probably because I was only 88 to 91 in college. And velocity totally runs the game. Like there's no denying it. Like if you're 95 plus, it plays. If you're not,
it buys you a seat at the table, right?
Exactly. So if I knew that putting on a bunch of weight would help me, that would definitely be it.
All right, favorite pitchers to watch and why?
Scherzer, probably in like today's day and age, just because of his competitiveness. And I know that's probably like the easy answer, but
yeah,
I mean, it's just so fun to watch a guy go out there and compete as hard as he does. And then hope you can do the same.
Yeah.
So,
and you have a frame of reference for it too. Like you get to see it in person in the off season. Like there's a level of crazy that's there year round. Like he trains that.
Oh my God. Totally. And there are so many times cause guys know that I work out with you and have been in the same gym as him and seen him. And it's like such little stuff that I pick up on, whether it's like when we play basketball or when, I remember in your old gym, there was like a bar that guys would touch, and when you were doing jumps, and there was like some 6'10" guys that were getting up there and touching it, and you got Scherzer who I don't know, he's like 6'2", 6'3", and he's trying to out jump them and touch the bar, and he's like walking around the gym pissed off because he can't do it, but you got like guys that are 8 inches taller than him doing it. So it's like that kind of mentality, and it's like it's a lift in December. It's not like it's not like the World Series. And
it's all he knows.
Exactly. So seeing that kind of stuff being brought out onto the mound is really fun to watch. But I don't think I'm very similar to him. He's like the high spin, 95 plus banger on a slider. So in terms of stuff, I loved watching Halladay. Roy Halladay, and I go back to his perfect games and no hitters that he's thrown all the time, watching him on YouTube, just because he's like, I know he's called the doc, but he's like an absolute surgeon on the mound. And obviously I wish I was able to have some type of conversation with him about what he did, because I know it wasn't too long ago, but still there wasn't all the data that is present to us now. And I would love to know how he was kind of able to pick up on tells of hitters, because he just carved guys with really below average stuff. I know it's kind of, he still was in the low 90s, but with good sink and like a pretty good curveball, but it wasn't anything that you thought was going to blow somebody away. And he was one of the best pitchers ever.
That's awesome. You don't normally hear like modern players talk about retired players. So that's a good find. All right. Last one. I'm actually really intrigued on this one. What's more important, stuff or command?
I mean, I have to say command, as more of a command guy. And honestly, there are so many guys, and I'm not trying to knock guys that get released or realize that it's not happening because they don't have command. They might have 100 miles an hour in their arm, but they can't find the zone. And these hitters are so friggin' good that if you're 100 miles an hour and you get behind in the count 2-0 because you got bad command and they're totally timed up on a 100 mile an hour fastball, you're going to get burnt. And I know we talked about it a few days, or it might have even been today, where there's going to be some type of correction because hitters are going to get timed up on 95 to 100 miles an hour, and some crafty lefty at 87 is going to carve for a full year because guys are ready for 100 miles an hour. And that's where I think that 100 mile an hour plus guy with below average command could still get hit, where but you still see those. I know they're very few. You got to be incredible command. You got to be 80 grade command to still get hitters out, especially over a full season. But I would say command just because I'm a command guy. I know it's like the bad way of saying it.
There's no right or wrong answer. All right. So this was awesome, man. Folks can find you on Instagram. It's instagram.com/official Mike King. And on Twitter,
the official. Don't forget that.
The official. And then on Twitter, it's @7kinger14. I have no idea what the significance of that is, but we'll make sure we throw it in the show notes as well. Mike, this is awesome. I'll obviously see you tomorrow morning, but thank you very much for taking the time. This was a blast.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.